In the prosperous kingdom of Nyandala, the air always seemed to shimmer with a certain kind of magic, a magic born not from spells or curses but from the unspoken bonds that wove its people together. Lush green forests stretched beyond the horizon, the markets bustled with vibrant colors and songs, and the palace stood tall, a beacon of power and history. At the heart of this kingdom lived Prince Kamau, a young man of noble blood but restless spirit, always yearning to understand the world beyond the castle walls. One day, while the sun dipped low and painted the sky with hues of gold and amber, Kamau slipped away from the royal guards. His heart pulled him toward the outskirts of Nyandala, where the village of small huts and dusty paths lay hidden between ancient trees. This was a place where life was raw, untouched by the luxury of the palace, and Kamau often found solace here, away from the weight of expectation. On this secret visit, he wandered deeper than ever before, until he met a girl unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her name was Loma. She was a mystery wrapped in simplicity, her clothes were worn and patched, and her hands bore the calluses of hard work, yet her eyes sparkled with a rare light, as if she held the secrets of the forest itself. Their meeting was brief but charged with an unspoken connection. Kamau, moved by something he could not name, reached into his pouch and pulled out a necklace. It was delicate yet striking, with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, crafted from silver that gleamed even in the fading light. This necklace was no ordinary trinket. It had belonged to Kamau's late mother, the queen whose wisdom and kindness had been the guiding star of Nyandala. It was said the necklace carried her spirit, a talisman to bring clarity and courage in moments of doubt and confusion. Kamau had kept it close, wrapped in silk, afraid to lose the last memory of her. But in that fleeting encounter with Loma, something compelled him to give it away. It was an impulsive act, born from the deep stirrings of his heart, a gift to a girl he believed he might never see again. "Keep it safe," Kamau whispered, "and may it guide you through your darkest days." Loma accepted the necklace with a mix of awe and disbelief, her fingers trembling as she fastened it around her neck. They parted ways under the dimming sky, each carrying a secret hope. Years passed. The kingdom of Nyandala thrived, but the edges of the world beyond the palace were not spared from hardship. Drought struck the land, crops failed, and famine whispered its cruel song through the villages. Kamau, now a young man burdened with the responsibilities of his birthright, resolved to help the suffering people. Disguised as a common traveler, he journeyed back to the outskirts, where the memories of his secret visit still lingered. It was in the heart of the village market that he saw her, a poor girl, her clothes tattered and her face smudged with the dust of hard living, yet around her neck hung the unmistakable crescent moon necklace. Kamau's breath caught in his throat. The necklace glowed faintly beneath the sun, just as it had years ago. The girl moved with a quiet grace, oblivious to the stir she was causing in the prince's heart. The necklace was unmistakable, but the girl herself was a puzzle. She bore no resemblance to Loma, or so it seemed at first glance. Her eyes were wide with innocence, yet held a sadness that spoke of untold stories. Kamau approached cautiously, unsure whether to reveal himself or remain hidden. The girl seemed unaware of the necklace's significance. When Kamau finally spoke to her, she shrugged as if the necklace were nothing more than a forgotten ornament. "It was given to me by my grandmother before she died," she said softly, her voice tinged with mystery. "I've had it all my life." Kamau's mind raced with questions, haunted by the shadows of the past. Where was Loma? How had the necklace come to this girl? Was this a coincidence, or something far more profound? The village around them buzzed with life, but Kamau felt isolated by the weight of the secret he carried. As he watched the girl disappear into the crowd, Kamau felt the stirrings of a destiny long buried, one that demanded answers and reckoning. The forgotten gift was no longer forgotten, and the threads of fate were beginning to weave a story that would shake the kingdom of Nyandala to its core. The girl's name was Nia, a slender figure who moved with cautious steps beneath the heavy weight of her world. Orphaned from a young age, she had no family of her own except a cruel aunt who took in the girl out of obligation rather than love. This aunt, a sharp-tongued woman with eyes as cold as the northern winds, treated Nia not as kin but as a servant. From dawn to dusk, Nia toiled in the shadows of her aunt's hut, washing clothes, fetching water, and cleaning floors with little rest. The neighbors whispered about the poor girl's fate, but no one dared to intervene, for the aunt was feared not only for her harshness but for her cunning mind. Despite the harshness of her daily life, Nia held close a single treasure, an old, delicate necklace that hung around her neck like a fragile thread connecting her to a world beyond her reach. The crescent-shaped pendant, worn smooth by years of contact with her skin, had been given to her by her dying grandmother. "Keep it close, child," her grandmother had said with trembling hands, "for it will guide you when the path is lost." Nia never parted with the necklace. Through long nights filled with loneliness and the harshness of her aunt's scolding, the necklace was a silent companion, a whispered promise of hope. Kamau, back in the village, felt the weight of his curiosity growing heavier with each passing day. The memory of the necklace haunted him, the way it had glinted in the sun, the way it had slipped so easily onto the girl's neck. He could not shake the feeling that this was no coincidence. Yet, he moved carefully, asking quiet questions at the market, in the small huts, and by the firesides where elders told their stories. Whispers began to ripple through the village, strange rumors about the prince's unusual interest in a peasant girl who seemed ordinary yet carried the mark of the royal past. These whispers reached even Nia's ears, bringing with them a mixture of fear and wonder. Why would the prince care about her? She dared not hope. Her life had been shaped by hardship, not fairy tales. Yet something deeper within her stirred, a faint glimmer of possibility she had never allowed herself to feel before. Then one morning, as the sun climbed lazily over the hills, the village elders summoned Nia to the village square. The gathering was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Villagers gathered in hushed clusters, eyes flickering between Nia and the elders who sat on carved wooden stools, faces grave and unreadable. Nia's heart pounded with fear. She thought she was in trouble. What had she done to draw the attention of the village's most powerful men? But what awaited her was far stranger than punishment. As the crowd parted, Kamau stepped forward, no longer disguised as a traveler but dressed in fine robes that marked his royal status. His eyes met hers with a gentle intensity, and the villagers fell silent. "Nia," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I have watched you from afar, and I see a strength in you that the world has not yet recognized. I want you to come to the palace, to serve not as a servant, but as someone worthy of respect." The words were like a thunderclap, shattering the invisible walls that had contained Nia's life. Yet her thoughts immediately flew to her aunt. What would she say? What punishments awaited if she left? And the palace, a place so distant and strange, filled with people who spoke a language of power and privilege, would she ever fit in? Before she could answer, a figure stepped from the shadows at the edge of the square, a village seer, an old woman whose eyes seemed to pierce the veil between past and present. Draped in faded cloth embroidered with ancient symbols, she raised a hand to silence the murmurs. "The past has come for its answer," the seer said softly but clearly, her gaze fixed on Nia and Kamau alike. "The necklace you wear is no mere ornament. It carries the weight of forgotten truths and ancient promises. To refuse this call is to deny the fate that has long awaited." Nia looked into the seer's eyes and saw the certainty there, a knowledge that went beyond fear or doubt. She felt the necklace resting against her chest, its cool silver a reminder of promises made long ago. Slowly, Nia nodded, the decision settling like a seed in her heart. She would go to the palace. Whatever awaited there, whether kindness or cruelty, she would face it. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of hope, fragile yet undeniable, weaving their way through the shadows of her life. As the crowd dispersed, Kamau offered a hand to Nia, a gesture of trust and protection. Together, they began the journey toward a future neither could fully see, bound by the mystery of a necklace and the whispers of a destiny long buried but now awakening. The palace rose like a shining jewel against the fading light of dusk, its walls carved with intricate patterns and its towers reaching toward the heavens. For Nia, stepping through its grand gates was like crossing into a world she had only dreamed of, a realm of gold and silk, marble floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and endless corridors where the air smelled of perfume and secrets. Every corner whispered stories of power and history, and yet, despite the dazzling beauty, an invisible barrier pressed against her, reminding her that she was an outsider in this world of privilege. Her footsteps echoed softly as she was led deeper into the palace by a quiet attendant, the weight of unfamiliar gazes following her like shadows. Nia's eyes darted around, taking in the gilded mirrors, the lush tapestries depicting past kings and queens, and the servants in pristine uniforms moving swiftly and silently. She could almost feel the pulse of the palace itself, alive with ambition, rivalry, and whispered plots. But beneath the glitter and grandeur, Nia sensed something else, an undercurrent of coldness, suspicion that chilled her more than the marble floors. It was not just that she was a stranger from the village, it was as if the palace itself resented her presence. When Nia was finally brought before the Queen Mother, the air grew even colder. The Queen Mother was a tall woman draped in robes of deep violet and silver, her sharp eyes like knives scanning Nia with a mix of skepticism and thinly veiled disdain. Her lips pressed into a tight line, revealing none of the warmth Nia had dared to hope for. "You are the girl the prince has taken an interest in," the Queen said, voice low and controlled. "Such affairs rarely end well." Nia bowed her head, words failing her in the presence of such authority. The Queen's gaze seemed to pierce through her, searching for any hint of deception or unworthiness. "You will remain here for now. Learn your place." With that, Nia was dismissed, left to wander the vast halls that felt both like a prison and a palace. The servants, always watching and whispering, soon took notice of Nia's arrival. At first, the gossip was hushed questions about who she was, why the prince favored her, and what she hoped to gain from the palace's cold embrace. But whispers quickly grew louder, and among the servants, one maid stood out, Jari. Jari was a young woman with sharp eyes and a quick tongue, known among the palace staff for her sly remarks and ability to stir trouble. From the moment Nia arrived, Jari's hostility was palpable, her gaze following Nia like a hawk's shadow. She spoke with thinly veiled sarcasm, questioning Nia's abilities and origins whenever she dared cross paths with her. "You don't belong here," Jari would say quietly but venomously, "and you never will." Nia tried to ignore the jabs, focusing instead on learning the palace's rhythms, but the feeling of being unwelcome only deepened. Meanwhile, Prince Kamau was consumed by a different kind of search. In the hidden chambers of the palace, far from the eyes of courtiers and servants, he pored over ancient royal records, dusty journals, and the cold stone crypts beneath the castle. His fingers traced the faded ink of forgotten pages, seeking answers to a question that had haunted him since he first saw Nia wearing the necklace. What had happened to Loma? Loma's name appeared rarely in the official records, as if deliberately erased from memory. But Kamau's persistence uncovered a chilling truth. The young village girl had vanished mysteriously years ago, shortly after an encounter with a jealous noblewoman named Lady Myram, a woman known for her cunning and ambition, and one who had long sought the prince's attention for herself. The journals hinted at bitter rivalry and whispered threats, and the noblewoman's cold glances seemed to linger on the prince like shadows of a storm yet to break. Loma's disappearance was never explained, but rumors suggested foul play. The discovery sent a chill through Kamau's heart. Had the necklace been lost because Loma was silenced? And what did that mean for Nia? While Kamau chased the ghosts of the past, Nia found herself drawn to a quiet, dusty corner of the palace library, where faded paintings hung forgotten on the walls. Among them was a portrait that stopped her breath. The painting was of a young woman, standing in a field of wildflowers, her eyes bright and full of life. But what struck Nia most was the face. It was her face. The same delicate features, the same dark eyes, the same soft smile. The girl in the painting was unmistakably Loma. How could this be? How could a painting from years ago show someone who looked exactly like her? Questions swirled in Nia's mind, a storm of confusion and wonder. She touched the canvas gently, as if reaching through time itself, desperate to understand the link between her and the forgotten girl who once wore the necklace that now rested against her own chest. The palace, with all its shadows and secrets, had opened a door that neither Nia nor Kamau could yet see the full extent of. The threads of the past and present were tangled tightly, and as the night deepened, the weight of what was to come pressed heavily upon them both. The moon hung low and heavy over Nyandala as Prince Kamau sought out a figure few dared approach in the palace's quietest corners, the old healer, Mzi Jabori. The man was a recluse, his years etched deeply into the lines of his face, his eyes sharp with wisdom and sorrow. Rumors said he knew the secrets of the kingdom, tales whispered in shadows, and truths too dangerous for the light of day. Kamau found Mzi Jabori in a small, hidden chamber behind the palace gardens, surrounded by herbs drying in bundles and faint smoke curling from a clay incense burner. The old man looked up as Kamau entered, his gaze steady and unreadable. "I hear you search for the past," Mzijabori said softly, his voice like cracked earth, carrying the weight of unspoken stories. Kamau nodded, his heart pounding. "I need to know what happened to Loma." The healer's eyes darkened with memory. Loma was more than the village girl who vanished. She bore a child out of wedlock after your secret meeting, Prince. The child was hidden away, wrapped in silence and shame. Her name was never spoken in the palace halls, for the truth threatened to unravel the fragile peace. The words fell like stones in Kamau's chest. A child. Hidden. A secret that could shake the foundations of his world. Kamau's mind raced back to Nia, the girl in the village who wore the necklace and whose face had echoed in an old painting. Was it possible that she was more than just a stranger? Could Nia be Loma's daughter and perhaps his own? The thought both terrified and compelled him. Meanwhile, Nia was not untouched by the stirring of forgotten truths. In the quiet hours of night, when the palace slept, strange visions haunted her dreams. She would see flashes of a woman running through a village consumed by flames, her face marked by desperation and fear. She heard the faint splash of something heavy falling into a rushing river. And sometimes, as if carried on the wind from another time, a lullaby wrapped in a language she did not know would echo softly in her ears. These dreams were not her own, they belonged to another, a life lived long before her own existence. The images burned with a clarity that both frightened and intrigued her. Confused and desperate for answers, Nia sought out her aunt during a rare visit home, her heart pounding with unspoken questions. The old, weathered hut seemed smaller than she remembered, shadows lengthening in the fading light. Her aunt's eyes, usually hard and cold, flickered with something unfamiliar, a flicker of guilt, perhaps, or sorrow. "Nia," the woman began, voice trembling, "there are truths I have kept from you. You are not my niece." Nia's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Her aunt's defenses crumbled, tears slipping down her weathered cheeks. "I was given a child, your child, to care for in secret. I was told to keep your identity hidden, to protect you from those who would shame you and silence your story. The necklace you wear, it was not from my grandmother. It was left with me by a woman on the verge of death." Nia's hands trembled as the weight of the revelation settled over her. Everything she had believed about her past was shattered, replaced by a fragile thread connecting her to a story far larger than herself. The truth of her origins was no longer a mystery hidden in dreams, it was a living, breathing reality that demanded answers. As the palace hummed with whispered rumors and guarded glances, Nia and Kamau stood on the edge of a truth that would bind their fates and challenge the very foundations of their lives. The necklace, the visions, the secrets buried beneath their skin all pointed to a destiny neither could have imagined. In the heart of Nyandala, the past was awakening, and with it, the promise of redemption, reckoning, and the unbreakable ties of blood. Kamau entered the king's private chamber with a heart weighed down by too many truths and not enough answers. The air was thick with incense and age, the windows shut tight against the winds of change that now stirred the palace walls. His father, once mighty and towering like the baobab trees of old, sat slumped in his throne-like chair, the years having chipped away at both strength and certainty. Still, the old king's eyes remained sharp, the gaze of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little. Kamau knelt slowly. "I need to know everything," he said. "No more lies." The king sighed, the sound long and tired, as if exhaling the weight of decades. "So it has come," he murmured. "The necklace led you back, didn't it?" Kamau nodded. "And the child?" "Nia." At that, the king closed his eyes, and his voice dropped to a whisper, ragged and frayed. "Loma was not a mistake, Kamau. She was the truth you were never allowed to have. When I learned of her pregnancy, I saw fire that could burn this entire kingdom. You were young, and our enemies were many. A prince cannot afford to give his heart where duty has not placed it." Kamau's jaw clenched. "So you erased her?" "No," the king said firmly. "We tried to shield her. We sent her away quietly, with plans to give her comfort and care. But Lady Nura, that viper, she saw what we tried to hide. Her ambitions were older than you knew, and when she discovered Loma's secret, she struck. She made it look like an accident, a fire in a distant village. We were told Loma died in it. There was no body. Only ashes. Kamau's heart hammered in his chest. So you let me believe she was dead. I let myself believe it too, the king said. It was easier. Cleaner. Kamau stood slowly, the weight of royal sins pressing on his shoulders. But she lived. And the child survived. Nia is my daughter. The king gave no protest, no denial. Then the bloodline continues, but not as we expected. And that changed everything. The revelation struck the palace like thunder on a clear day. The Queen Mother, when told, did not cry or plead. She seethed. Her fury was cold and sharp, not like wildfire but like a blade honed in silence. She is a peasant girl, she spat. The daughter of scandal. You would name her heir. You would stain our lineage with the whispers of the market square. She is your blood, Kamau replied. She is the truth that outlived the lie. But the Queen Mother was unmoved. If this truth rises, the throne will not be hers, it will fall. The nobles will revolt. The kingdom will divide. Palace halls once filled with music and murmurs of loyalty now echoed with suspicion. Servants stopped whispering when Nia entered a room. Courtiers bowed too stiffly or not at all. Some dared not meet her eyes, others looked at her with a blend of curiosity and fear, as if she carried with her a fire that could not be extinguished. Even among the guards, there were murmurs. A village-born girl claiming royal blood? An heir with no noble mother, no palace grooming, no political alliances? It was unheard of. Lady Nura, still present in court though older and cloaked in new silks, watched all with hawk-like precision. She knew the truth now teetered on a knife's edge, and she was no stranger to sharpening blades. Meanwhile, omens began to stir across Nyandala. A crow was seen perching on the palace gate for 7 nights in a row, an ill sign, the seers said. The river that once ran clear through the heart of the kingdom began to darken with silt, and some claimed it was morning. A servant swore the statue of the first queen wept blood at dawn. Others claimed the wind whispered Loma's name as it passed through the ancient halls. Superstition grew bold in the vacuum of certainty. Some said the royal line was cursed, that the ancestors were displeased with secrets long buried and truths dragged into daylight. Others feared rebellion, that nobles would strike first to protect their version of honor. Kamau stood in the storm, silent but unyielding. He visited the old temple, lit candles for the ancestors, and walked through the gardens where Loma once laughed under moonlight. In Nia's eyes, he saw the same defiance, the same warmth. And he knew she belonged. But belonging and ruling were not the same. The kingdom trembled, not from war or famine, but from a name remembered, Loma, and the child she left behind. The bloodline had spoken. And now, nothing could remain hidden. Lady Nura stood at the edge of the sacred cliffs, the sea wind lashing her robes as she looked into the horizon. She had not seen the capital in 10 years, not since the fire, not since the whispers and accusations. Not since the quiet deal that allowed her to leave without chains. She had risen high in the mountain temple since then, cloaked herself in prayer and politics, ascending to the role of high priestess. But all of it paled in comparison to the one message that had come through her private channels. A girl at court now wears the lost necklace. Her pulse had not raced like that in years. That necklace should have burned with the village. With her. But if the girl lived, and worse if she was Loma's daughter, then all the years of silence had bought her nothing. Her enemies would have a symbol now. A truth made flesh. With robes of peace and prayers on her lips, she descended the mountain under the guise of a diplomatic envoy. She arrived at court with incense, offerings, and practiced humility. Her voice, once sharp enough to cut glass, was now velvet. She kissed the Queen Mother's hand, praised the young prince's wisdom, and asked politely for time to pray at the royal temple. But in her private chambers, she lit no candles. Instead, she called upon old allies in the shadows, men and women who owed her favors, debts written not in gold but in fear. She would not allow a girl to undo what she had built from ruin. Nia, meanwhile, was changing. Since her appointment as royal ward, she had tried to keep her head down, her spirit calm. But the stairs had grown colder. The air thicker. At first, she dismissed the nightly whispers in her room as palace wind. Then came the dreams, disjointed visions of fire, of a woman weeping by a river, of voices calling her name from behind walls. She began waking with cold sweats, her sheets damp and her heart racing. Her appetite faded. She felt dizzy in the afternoons, sometimes forgetting where she was. One night, while dining in the royal hall, she collapsed mid-meal. Panic swept the room. The palace healer rushed to her side and later, in hushed tones, told Kamau, "The girl is being poisoned. Slowly. Deliberately. Someone wants her dead without making it look like murder." Kamau's rage was silent but searing. He locked down the kitchens, ordered all servants questioned, and had Nia moved to a chamber nearer to his. But deep down, he knew this was not random court jealousy or class disdain. This was deliberate, methodical. This had Lady Nura written all over it. Remembering the village seer's earlier warning, Kamau sent a rider under darkness to fetch her again. The seer came cloaked in moss-colored robes, her face weathered like cracked earth. She sat with Nia in silence, laid a wrinkled hand over the necklace, and whispered ancient words. The necklace shimmered faintly, like fire beneath glass. "This is no trinket," the seer said. "It carries blood memory. Protection. If not for it, the girl would already be dead. But it is not infinite. The talisman defends, but it also awakens what sleeps within her." "Awakens what?" Kamau asked. But the seer would not say more. "She must remember," was all she murmured, "and she must be strong when she does." That night, the shadows came. A group of masked intruders slipped into the palace through a hidden servant tunnel long forgotten. They moved with precision, not wasting time, armed with blades coated in a thick, dark resin. Their orders were clear: kill the girl, leave no trace. Nia stirred in her bed, the dreams stronger now, full of heat and running feet and screams from a village long gone. She heard the door creak and saw figures slip in like ink in water. Her breath caught, her limbs heavy, sluggish. One of the attackers raised his knife. But then the necklace burned. A burst of golden light exploded from her chest, throwing the intruders backward as if struck by a cyclone. The walls shook. A loud crack of wind and sound rippled through the palace. Guards rushed in seconds later to find Nia surrounded by overturned furniture, the curtains scorched, and 4 unconscious men on the ground, each one marked with burns in the shape of an ancient tribal glyph. Lady Nura's face was stone when she heard the news. She was in the prayer hall, her hands folded politely, but her nails dug into her palms hard enough to bleed. She had underestimated the power of the necklace. Of her. "She is not just a girl," Nura whispered to herself that night, staring into her reflection. "She is the echo of Loma. And echoes can become storms." But she would not give up. Not yet. If poison and blades had failed, there were still older paths. Darker paths. Paths the necklace could not shield against forever. Back in her chamber, Nia sat wide awake, clutching the necklace. She no longer feared it. She understood now it wasn't protecting her alone. It was reminding her of who she was, of what was taken, and of what must be reclaimed. Outside, a new wind howled through the palace. The game had changed. The girl they tried to erase had become the girl they could not touch. And Lady Nura knew she would need more than daggers to kill a legacy. The wind screamed through Nyandala like a living creature, howling between rooftops and tearing through trees. The clouds hung thick and bruised, their bellies swollen with storms that had refused to break until now. Thunder cracked open the sky, and with it, a new era. In the palace, Nia stood barefoot before the window, her hands wrapped tightly around the glowing necklace. She could feel something stirring within her, not fear, not even strength, but memory. The kind that lives in blood and bone. The kind that waits. Her recovery had been slow. The poison had left her weakened, and the nights remained haunted. But the attacks had ceased. No one dared move against her after what the necklace had done. She had become both a curiosity and a warning, a girl wrapped in old power. Some bowed as she passed, others turned their faces away, whispering of curses and omens. But Kamau believed. He had watched her closely every day, silently piecing together the woman she was becoming. Not just his daughter, but Loma's echo. A symbol of a truth long buried. Now, As the storm shattered the sky outside, he felt something else, an ending approaching. Or maybe a beginning. The village seer remained close, sleeping in the palace gardens beneath an ancient baobab, whispering chants to the roots. Nia had begun sitting with her daily, listening to stories older than the kingdom. She learned the sacred symbols, the meanings of certain dreams, how fire carried truth, and how water could remember. She no longer ran from the dreams. She recorded them, studied them. One showed her a burning hut. Another, her mother wrapping her in cloth, whispering lullabies before handing her off to a shadowy figure. The kingdom, however, was unraveling. The rain that finally fell turned violent. The rivers swelled and burst, sweeping away livestock and homes. Crops drowned. Children went hungry. The people, already nervous about Nia's mysterious presence, grew afraid. They remembered the ancient belief, when the spirits grow angry, they show it through storm and earth. Lady Nura seized the moment. Standing before the council of elders, cloaked in her high priestess robes, she raised her hands and declared, "This girl, with her strange power and unknown blood, has brought imbalance. The ancestors cry for truth. Let the old ways decide if she belongs." A hush fell over the court. She was invoking the trial of truth, a sacred, rarely used rite that tested the very essence of a person. It was not a trial of words or weapons, but one of blood, soul, and spirit. If Nia truly belonged to the royal bloodline and the ancestral spirits accepted her, she would survive. If not, she would perish in fire. Kamau protested at first, but the council ruled unanimously. The people demanded clarity. And Nia, standing in the royal court with lightning flashing behind her, said softly, "I accept." The trial was to be held in the sacred clearing just outside the capital, a place where fire met sky and stone. Thousands gathered, nobles in embroidered cloaks, villagers in drenched shawls, children on shoulders. The Queen Mother sat rigidly on her golden chair, her lips tight with dread. Kamau stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, his fists clenched. Lady Nura stood near the sacred flame, her face serene but her eyes gleaming. She bowed theatrically as Nia stepped forward. Nia wore a simple white robe and no shoes. Her hair was braided back, and around her neck glowed the necklace, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. As the crowd fell silent, the seer began to chant in the old tongue, calling the spirits of earth, wind, fire, and blood. The flame before Nia grew tall, hungry, almost blue. She stepped toward it. Whispers rose. "She'll burn. She's just a girl. She's not royal." Kamau couldn't breathe. Nia paused before the fire. Then, with a calm that did not belong to any child born of servants, she stepped into it. Gasps exploded around the circle. But she did not scream. She did not fall. The fire twisted around her like a serpent, coiling and lifting. And then, it changed. Inside the flames, visions appeared, transparent but clear. A woman, Loma, young, barefoot, running through a village ablaze. Her arms cradled a bundle. Behind her, warriors stormed the huts. She reached a riverbank, handed the child to a cloaked woman, and turned back. A final image showed her whispering, "Kamau must know," before being swallowed by fire. The flames cracked. Another vision appeared of Kamau as a youth, standing in that very village, pressing the necklace into Loma's hand. Their foreheads touched, eyes wet. A promise made. A moment lost. The crowd watched, silent, as the final vision showed a glowing strand of light flowing from Loma to the child Nia and then from Nia to the necklace. The fire vanished with a gust. And Nia stood untouched. The white robe was unstained. Her skin unburned. But her eyes, they glowed with something that silenced the entire kingdom. The seer raised her staff. "The spirits have spoken." Kamau stepped forward, tears burning behind his eyes. Lady Nura stared, white as ash. Her mouth opened to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The Queen Mother looked down, trembling. Nia turned slowly to face the people. "I am Nia, daughter of Loma. Blood of the royal line. Chosen of the spirits." The crowd erupted, not with cheers, not yet, but with awe. Fear, yes. But also wonder. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Fire did not lie. Kamau stepped beside her and took her hand. "Welcome home," he whispered. That night, as the storm finally passed and the stars returned, the kingdom of Nyandala began to change. And Lady Nura, watching from the shadows of the palace walls, knew her power had cracked. But she was not done yet. The echoes of fire had barely faded from the sacred clearing when the council convened. There were no debates, no divided voices. What had been witnessed was irrefutable, the spirits had spoken through flame, and Nia was their chosen. Even the oldest skeptics found themselves speechless. The trial of truth had not only vindicated Nia but rewritten the history of Nyandala. Lady Nura was arrested the same night. Her titles were stripped, her priestess robes burned in front of the palace gates. The guards bound her in chains carved with old sigils to suppress her whispered magic. Kamau stood before her as the judgment was read aloud. The crimes listed were many: conspiracy, attempted regicide, poisoning, ancestral desecration, and the murder of Loma, an offense both mortal and spiritual. She was banished to the edge of the known world, where Nyandala's borders met the cursed forest. "Let the winds forget you," the seer intoned as Lady Nura was taken away, her eyes still burning with defiance, though her power was broken. Her name would be etched into royal scrolls, not as a noblewoman, not as a priestess, but as a warning. Back in the palace, peace didn't settle easily. The Queen Mother fell ill within a fortnight. She did not speak of Nia during the first days of her sickness, only stared out her window at the garden where the baobab tree shed its golden leaves. Kamau visited her daily, hoping for a change. But the woman who had once commanded entire armies and silenced courts with a look now seemed hollowed by guilt. The truth had pierced her, too sharp, too deep. She had wronged a woman, scorned a child, and tried to preserve a legacy built on denial. But it was Nia who knelt by her bedside when the end came. The Queen Mother, gaunt and pale, looked upon her with eyes softened by defeat. "You are everything I refused to see," she whispered. "And more." Nia took her hand and kissed it gently. The Queen Mother's voice, barely audible, said, "Rule with the heart I feared. It will save them. Save us all." Then, with the slow breath of one unburdened, she closed her eyes. A week of mourning followed. Bells rang in the capital, and thousands lit candles. Yet beneath the sorrow was a pulse of anticipation. Change had arrived, and it bore a new name. Kamau surprised everyone with his next decision. He stood before the court, not in royal garb, but in the simple robes of a counselor. "I have served my people as prince, and I have failed them by hiding the truth," he said. "But I have been given something far greater than a crown, a daughter, born of love and destiny. She has been tested by fire and proven herself through storms. From this day, she shall be your queen." The hall erupted not in uproar, but in murmurs of awe. Nia stepped forward, graceful yet grounded. Her gown was made of woven fibers dyed in the colors of the four elements: earth brown, fire red, water blue, and air white. The necklace glowed faintly against her chest. "Today," she began, "we start again. Not from ash, but from truth." She was crowned under an open sky, the first monarch to do so in centuries. Rain threatened, but held back, as if even the heavens wanted to watch. The seer anointed her with oil, and Kamau placed the crown upon her head. Queen Nia of Nyandala had risen. Her rule began not with decrees of power, but with acts of healing. The first order she gave was to return to the village where her mother had once lived. It had long been neglected, a place spoken of only in rumors. She walked its paths barefoot, her fingers brushing over broken walls and charred earth. And then, she ordered it rebuilt, not as a monument to sorrow, but as a sanctuary. She named it Loma's Light, and declared it a learning center for young girls, especially orphans and the poor. "May no child be hidden in shame," she said, "and no girl ever doubt her worth." The people wept at her words. Stone by stone, the village transformed. Children ran laughing where silence once lived. Women painted stories across the walls of Loma, of the fire, of the necklace, of Nia's emergence from flame. Songs were written, dances choreographed. The story became legend while still being lived. Meanwhile, Kamau served not from a throne, but beside his daughter. He taught her diplomacy, strategy, and the difficult art of listening. He never returned to the title of prince, though many still called him so. To Nia, He was simply father. In the palace, the necklace was finally placed in the sacred vault, where relics of the ancestors were kept. But before doing so, Nia had a perfect replica crafted. She wore it daily, close to her skin, over her heart. It was a reminder of a girl who loved in secret, a gift given on impulse, and the journey that necklace had begun. The years passed. Under Queen Nia's reign, Nyandula thrived. Trade flourished, and famine never again plagued the land. Girls and boys were educated side by side. The village seer became high spiritual advisor, guiding policies rooted in harmony with the land and the spirits. Peace treaties were signed with distant tribes. Old laws that had silenced women were rewritten. Yet, Queen Nia never allowed herself to forget where she came from. Each year, on the anniversary of the fire that had taken her mother, she visited Loma's light alone. She sat beneath a new baobab tree grown from seeds taken from the palace gardens, the same tree under which the village seer used to sleep. And each year, she listened to the wind. For sometimes, she swore she could still hear the lullaby from her dreams. On one such evening, as the moon hung like a lantern in the sky, an old man gathered children around a fire just outside the village. He leaned close and said, "Let me tell you a story. A prince once gave away a necklace. He thought it was nothing, just a keepsake, a passing gesture. But the spirits had other plans. They took that gift and turned it into a seed. And from that seed, a queen was born." The children gasped. He winked and added, "You see, my little stars, magic doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it begins with something as small as a gift. A necklace. A name. A girl." The flames flickered as the story settled into their bones. And far above, hidden among the stars, the spirits watched in silence, content that truth had finally found its throne.